In the Spiralians, we will be discussing about the evolutionary trends within the phylum Mollusca. So there was a period which is called Phanerozoic era, and in that there was a spectacular variety of mollusk morphotypes and life modes. And these mollusk morphotypes means that these were the organisms which looked like mollusks. These are the soft-bodied organisms, and some of them were evolving the shells. And they evolved during the Phanerozoic era. And they were gradually going from the simple body plan of the archaeomollusks that we consider today as the ancient mollusk ancestor. They were having that particular body plan. Despite the diversity of the early mollusk in the Cambrian, the phylum was not notably conspicuous in the tiered suspension feeding. So, after the earlier Phanerozoic, there came the Cambrian period. In the Cambrian period, there was the diversity, but there were other organisms which were having much more abundance, and these spiralians, these mollusks in general, these were not the dominant organisms of the life, or not even the oceans or on the terrestrial environment. These were not the dominant organisms, and in particular, one particular niche is tiered suspension feeding. So there is a feeding system in which the organisms are tiered in the ocean, right? So there are some organisms which are feeding on the surface, some are floating, and some are feeding in the bottom of the sea. So even in these different tier systems, there was not much more abundance of these spiralians or the mollusks. So in the mollusks, there were during the Paleozoic era, the bivalves were common in the nearshore environment, and these were associated with the linguloid brachiopods. We have discussed about the linguloid brachiopods in the earlier topics, and these were having some association with them. And in a way, we have discussed earlier that the bivalves are having a common structure, a much more related structure with the brachiopods as well. So they were having the same niche as well. And there are some groups which inhabited the deeper water clastic environment. So what is clastic environment? The clastic environment is an environment of the sediments, right? So all the things that drop down in the ocean, they make the sediments. It may be a gravel which comes along with the rivers, or it may be the organic matter which is flourishing all over the sea. Ultimately, it will come down the bottom of the sea, and this make the sediments, and these sediments are making the clastic environments, and these were the bivalves which were inhabiting that environment. So during the late Paleozoic, a variety of carbonate environments were established by the bivalves. So what are the carbonate environments? That means they were having some more and more calcium carbonate deposition, and they are the sediments of the chalk that we see today. These were formed by these bivalves. And at the end of the Paleozoic, the shallow water belts displayed the Paleozoic associations seaward. So at the end of the Paleozoic, ultimately, these shallow water belts, which were inhabited by the bivalves adapted to go into the open ocean, where they had much more niches to occupy. And after that, there are the Mesozoic and Cenozoic era, and in which during the late Mesozoic and Cenozoic era, the significant radiation of infernal taxa. So what does the infernal mean? The infernal means that we have discussed this before. The infernal, when an organism is living at the bottom of the sea, and in the bottom of the sea, it makes burrows and lives inside Infernal means inside the sediments or inside the bottom. So what does it do? Because it was a response to the increased predation. If an organism is epifaunal, which is living above the surface bottom of the sea, it has much more chances of being fell prey to the predators. But if an organism lives inside the sediments, a predator would not be able to find, and that was an evolutionary thing that they have adapted evolutionarily to become much more to survive better. And then there comes the gastropods. The majority were the Paleozoic gastropods were Eogastropoda. So they dominated the shallow water marine environments and some carbonate reef settings as well. So these were the gastropoda, which we have discussed already. The snail or the slugs, or these are in the shell, they are having the coiled one piece shells. These organisms were present during the Paleozoic era, and they had some diversity then. And then comes the Mesozoic era. In the Mesozoic, the Mesogastropoda was evolved, and they grazed on algal coated hard substrate. And after that, the Cenozoic, the group of the acme of the group with the radiation of the siphonal carnivorous neogastropods. So siphonal carnivorous means that they were feeding on the other organism, and siphonal means that they were having some inhalation of the water and pump the water out so that they can move. So these are the neogastropods. Neo means new, gastropods means the gastropod. So the new group of gastropod was evolved during the Cenozoic. Alright, so here we can see the diagram of the stratigraphic ranges of the main mollusk groups. From the left to the right, you can see the different ages, just like Paleozoic, Mesozoic, Cenozoic eras. And then there are the periods, which are the lower and upper Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian, Carboniferous, and Permian. So a lower Paleozoic are the first three, and the later three are the upper Paleozoic. And then there comes the Mesozoic, and Paleogene and Neogene contains the Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, and Neogene contains the Miocene and Pliocene. And then there comes the Quaternary stage in which we are living today. So, and you can see the different areas in the time in which these different organisms were living. For example, Diplacophorans, these are extinct, and so are the Halcyon And apart from the Rostroconchia, all the other classes, just like Monoplacophorans, Aplacophorans, Scaphopoda, Gastropoda, Polyplacophora, Cephalopoda, all of these organisms are surviving as of today, and we can see their origins as well as how they are evolving even today and having their diversity. So this is actually a stratigraphic range of the main mollusk groups. And then there comes the last group, which we will be discussing, that how did they evolve. Those are the cephalopods. So cephalopods, we have discussed these in the earlier topics. So during the Mesozoic, they had a radiation in which the many experimentation behavior developed among the cephalopods. And they developed the development of a chambered shell with a siphuncle, which gave them considerable control over altitude, attitude, and buoyancy. So they had some water-filled tubes among the different organs of their body, and these fluid they filled with them water, and then they can push that water out in the form of pumping the water out, and they can move and have the buoyancy according to their needs and attitude. The attitude is predatory because cephalopods are the organism which are predatory in nature. So and buoyancy, that means they were able to move around in the water environment more easily due to these adaptation during the Mesozoic.